Hello and welcome once again to It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. I'm your host, Frank Weber. So glad that you could join me in the forest for the 75th time as of this episode. I'm not a big commemorative guy. I don't really want to do celebrations for them so much, but it is kind of important to kind of reiterate some of the things that the show is about every so often, and I think some of you would like to hear some of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick before getting into a few minor topics that hopefully I won't take too long on today, but I think are important for you to hear. And that's one of the main reasons that I do this show. There's actually lots and lots and lots of reasons, and I have a lot of different ideas for exactly where I'd like to take the show. But I try to talk about topics that are a bit obscure and either never get talked about in the mainstream media, or and we should talk about them, or maybe they're talked about but they don't really put the right spin on them or the right opinion of them, at least from my worldview. And I realize there's a segment of the population that is just not going to care one way or the other about what I have to say or about what anybody really has to say. And that's their right. Under free speech, they have the right to not listen to anybody in particular, including myself. But my hope is that it will pique your interest. These topics will. And you'll become more curious and want to know more. And that hopefully you will gain maybe an intellectual interest, whether that means asking me more questions or perhaps commenting about the situation yourself. And that's kind of another hurdle, though, that exists in our world, though, because not everybody gets interested, stays interested, and I think a lot of times there's also trouble with regard to being able to process things intellectually. And I don't consider myself the best speaker and maybe the best explainer or storyteller, but I'm on this show trying my damnedest to help you with that if I can, and I'm hopefully make a little bit of a difference in your lives one way or another, whether it's just to make you laugh or entertain you or to further educate you on these things that seem so subtle and just not either not talked about at all or not talked about much and in the right manner. And another big reason that I do the show is because podcasting is a window into the souls of the hosts and guests. If the podcast has any, I at some point eventually, it may take a long time, but I do want to have guests on this show. I do think it would make it more robust, but there's some difficulties with that at the moment. And obviously, if you listen long enough, you're going to get to know the guests pretty well, and the host especially well. And we all want to be known, and we want to know other people as well. It's part of our humanity. It's innate in us. And it kind of reminds me of a situation, just as an analogy. There was a civic group that I was a part of. I haven't been there in a couple of years. We had kind of a falling out. I think I mentioned it on the show here before, but there was a young lady in that group who decided one day the group was growing very, very large, and that was actually one of the things that kind of eventually turned me off to it. But the group was growing larger and larger, and we had a lot of new people there. People may or may not have known their names, and they especially may not have known anything about them. And this young lady decided to have the members do a questionnaire and ask some basic, answer some basic questions about themselves, and then she would put it into a sheet and she'd have 2 or 3 sheets on each table every meeting every week, and that you could look at them real quick and get just a glimpse at getting to know them better. You're not going to know them as well as you would personally meeting with them one-on-one or even through this medium that podcasting is. But it was a great idea and a great plan, and I did it myself, and I thought it was great. She did edit a couple of my answers for space, which I understand, but still kind of bothered me a little bit that they were edited. But so be it. That wasn't what caused me to leave the group. But that's kind of what I'm trying to do on this show. That's something that has far-reaching. What's the word? Not outgrowth, but that it manifests itself in a lot of ways. People want to know, and they want to be known, and they want to be part of a community. And yet we seem so isolated and maybe more lonely than we've ever been in this world, especially with all this technological connection. And anyway, so that's another reason that I do the show, and I hope it's kind of not too deep. I try to make it funny and lighthearted, although some subjects do get to be a little bit deeper. So those are 2 big reasons why I do them. I actually have tons and tons of reasons. I feel like just doing this for a long time now that we're on 75 shows, even if the show isn't that good, I get the feeling that longevity is going to work in our favor here. And I'm also not a big fan of niches or niches, whichever you want to call it. Some of the biggest podcasts in the world have no niche. And that's why the show is all over the place like it is. Oh, and then before we get off the topic of the 75th episode, there is a story kind of with that related to the civic group's questionnaire. I always wish that I feel like my life is an open book, by the way. Okay, you can ask me anything you want to. I don't care how deep or naughty or whatever disturbing, whatever label you want to put on it. You can ask me anything, okay? And I wish that at the civic group, I wish somebody would ask me, what is your favorite or funniest, or what do you think your funniest dentist movie is? Because dentistry, of course, is my former profession. And you're talking about funny movies and comedy, which is becoming a passion of mine and has always been a passion of mine. And I had an interesting experience this weekend. Turner Classic Movies was showing a number of Westerns, and they showed Blazing Saddles Saturday night. Uncut, of course. That's the only way you can watch it and get the full message. And I don't believe in editing movies at all. Doesn't make any sense. And after that, they played a movie. I turned it back to like football. I was watching football instead for a little bit. But there was a movie on afterwards called The Paleface with Bob Hope and Jane Russell from like the late 40s. And Jane Russell was smashing in it as always. And the thing that I really noticed, apparently there's also a sequel to it called Son of the Paleface from a few years later, with also with Bob Hope and Jane Russell. But the movie was very similar to a 1967 or 68 movie called The Shakiest Gun in the West with Don Knotts. So apparently The Shakiest Gun in the West, which is the answer that I would have been, that's the answer that I would have given for the funniest dentist movie, had I been asked that, but nobody has ever asked me that. I would have said Shakiest Gun in the West, but even back then, a lot of movies were either being remade or using a lot of the plot elements because the paleface, Bob Hope, played kind of a goofy dentist who got married to a very, I guess you could say, streetwise Western woman who only wanted to get married so that she could use him as a cover. And so I just thought that was odd. A movie from the 60s that I truly like. You know, Don Knotts is a great comedian and goofy and was a ventriloquist too. That movie took a lot from the movie called The Paleface. So I just wanted to point that out to you. And that I once again, as you already know, I can't stand editing of movies. I kind of started thinking too, not just Blazing Saddles, but like there was a scene in Major League where the scenes with the grounds crew, who I think are like Asian or something, but I'm not sure about that. I don't know if they're Asian descent or Hispanic descent, or it doesn't really matter. They speak another language. But the Cleveland Indians, as they were known at the time, were a crappy baseball team for the movie. And the grounds crew commented that using subtitles, that they just simply said, "They're shitty." And it was funny. But if you go look at the edits to that movie, they changed "they're shitty" to "they're lousy," and it's not funny anymore. So again, you have to really watch out with details like that. And of course, there's a scene near the end that whose edit itself was very hysterical, but I don't have time to get into that today. But anyway, I was talking about all this because there's a question that I wish people would ask me, and I wish they would ask me a lot of other questions, and they would not just ask me these questions, but they would listen to my responses and not just have them go in one ear and out the other, but just listen to them and digest them and understand them, because I try very hard to do the same thing when I'm in conversation with other people. And so with that, we'll just say happy 75th episode to The Forest and It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. Looking forward to doing many, many more. Yeah, doing many, many more episodes talking about things all over the spectrum of things that should probably become more mainstream, I think, in the world as well. I'm a proponent of naturism and the unclothed state, for instance, at least in situations where, most situations where employees are off the clock. I think it should be acceptable. Now, we can get into all the details of that later. And then I also feel like I understand God and faith and kind of the proper, what's the word? God and faith and Christianity in a context that is different than a lot of the organized religious institutions that you can go for that information. It takes years of experience and some questioning and new information to come forward, but there's stuff to learn here that you're not going to find in a church anywhere. And I'm hoping, to share that with you here. And so, but I'm not planning on going into either of those subjects today. I actually have a couple of different brief subjects that I wanted to get into today that are in the news. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Not trying to keep you here too long. I think last week's episode was a little longer than I wanted it to be. And I think I'm going to talk today. I don't really like to talk about specific sports and specific teams, but I think it's kind of important to hear, because if you get too much into the details, some people aren't really interested in it, and because it's not their favorite team, or I don't know, they have something else going on. Like, it's crazy. Like, the NFL is starting up now, a very popular sport in this country. But then, so is college football, yet somehow most of the people that I hear or talk to seem to like the NFL better. So I don't really know what all the dynamic is involving that. But if you get into specific games and talking about specific teams, I think a lot of people tend to tune out. And so this may be an area where you can't be too niche or niche, in fact, for that matter. But as many of you know, I'm a student at Texas Tech doing a master's degree, financial planning, and the MBA. And I was an undergrad there, graduated 25 years ago. Our mega donor extraordinaire, Cody Campbell, who's also the chairman of the Board of Regents now, released a commercial during these football games, during college football games, and they actually come on certain channels at other times. I've seen them on Fox News and Fox Business. And it was obviously it's only a 30-minute spot, but it's very vague in terms of the issue that he's talking about and his proposed solution. And I actually, for some reason, I even go to a tech message board, and they haven't really discussed this at all, I don't think, unless I just haven't seen it there. But he's at Jones Stadium on the field there. It's quite obvious where he is, and at least to me. And he's saying that college sports, both men's and women's, and sports that are also seen in the Olympics, are dying from the college campus perspective. He doesn't go into the details of exactly what that is. I don't know if he directs us to a website. I didn't go to the website, but I did read a couple of articles about it. I agree that college sports are dying, but I'm not sure, since it's only 30 seconds, that the reasoning of mine is the same as his. I think they're dying for a number of different reasons, and it's all because of greed and certain schools and certain, maybe some of their leadership wanting a bigger pie for their school versus, relatively similar pies for the other schools, I guess you could say. And as being in a league, you have to, at whatever level, you have to kind of look at what's best for the league. I think my reasoning is probably somewhat related to his, but again, he doesn't go into the details of that. I do think there is a crisis, but apparently there are some writers and experts out there who think there is no crisis for some reason. So that's why I need to put this out there to you. Anyway, his solution is, and I had to look at the details on this as well, is that there's a Sports Broadcasting Act that was passed in 1961 that allows professional sports leagues in this country, that's who it was written for, to make their own TV deals at the league level as opposed to at a conference or division level. And it also made some other rules. The TV blackout rules that came from that act, as well as the TV blackout rules. In other words, your local team's game can be blacked out within 75 miles of the stadium on game day if it's not sold out. The NFL is notorious for doing that, and there's the other sports you apply those rules as well. And there's also stuff in there about the NFL not playing on Friday nights and Saturdays for most of the season because of high school and college football. That's actually the most recent law regarding that. Apparently, Cody wants the NCAA to now be included in that act. But then the problem with that is the current TV structure and the dependence on TV is a result of a 1984 Supreme Court decision that allowed conferences, instead of the NCAA, it allowed conferences to make their own TV deals. There weren't as many TV deals or TV outlets back in those days. And so you didn't have, teams couldn't be on every week like they are now. But presumably if you regress to a pre-1984 state, the year 1984, not the book by Orwell, then you're actually going backwards in terms of the college football progression since then. So it's a 30-second ad. I'm sure you've seen it if you watched any college games or certain channels at other times this year. But it was kind of vague, kind of confusing. He probably has a website for it somewhere, so maybe we'll know more about that. But the challenges to college sports are very real, and that's all I can say about that. Those who deny that are living in a different world. The last thing I wanted to say today, because I haven't really kept up too much with this, I watched a little of the Cowboys-Eagles game the other night. It was the first game of the NFL season. The Eagles won 24-20. It was a closely contested game and a fairly fun and interesting game. I don't really expect a lot out of the Cowboys this year. But apparently there's an incident, and I watched it live when this happened, where, of course, a lot of athletes, and I know it seems to traditionally more common in baseball with spitting and everything, but it happens a fair amount in football. And apparently Dak Prescott spit on the ground, not really directed toward anybody, kind of lifted up his helmet a little bit and then spit it out. And then one of the Eagles players apparently was watching him, came over and then spit on him, on Dak, and then the Eagles player was ejected. And now there's like some weird controversy related to this. I don't really know what the deal is. Like there's a guy on Fox News, Jesse Waters, who honestly is pretty annoying, and I think he can get under a lot of people's skin. Even though, like, politically, I tend to side with him. I like his logic and reasoning and everything. But he's a big Eagles fan, and the Eagles won the game, which should be satisfying to him. But because this Eagles player then spit on Dak and was ejected, they think that there's something uneven going on there, and that either quarterbacks are getting special treatment, which they are. But then this situation, Dak was not spitting at anybody, and I saw it on TV, but this other guy spit on him. So I don't understand what the controversy is there. I think the NFL makes a lot of hype and gets a lot of attention from situations like this that are really big nothing burgers, and it just helps people talk about the game and helps their brand, even though I honestly think the quality of most games and what they're trying to do these days is just not as good as it once was. But that's my 2 cents on that subject, because I'm sure people would be interested in hearing what interested in hearing me talk about that. But for some reason, this has gone viral and continues to be a subject amongst a lot of people, including some people who aren't really big sports fans. But that's how the NFL does it. That's how it hypes up its product, and that's how it gets more people watching a product that I just sometimes feel is pretty questionable in terms of whether it needs to be watched or not. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show here today. Should be around 25 minutes or so. But as always, I ask you, sharing is caring. Share with those all around you, friends, family, loved ones, wives, girlfriends, husbands, boyfriends, whatever. If you have both, or anybody you run into, whether it's at the park or at church or the beach or, Starbucks or grocery store, whatever, please share this show with them. Hit that subscribe button. would love to hear comments from you and direct messaging as well. So anyway, I'm going to get out of here now. So thank you so much. I have to tell you that thank you so much for being here for 75 episodes. I hope some of you have listened to all the episodes. I really appreciate it if you have. And gosh, I needed to say one other thing too. I'm always forgetting things. By the way, I just want to tell you, and then we really will leave, okay? That I gave blood last week for the first time in nearly 5 years. I had kind of stopped going because I got very lightheaded, and I probably wasn't real positioned in the right fashion. But this time, I was very well hydrated. I had some food in me, and I was in a comfortable chair in a what is that? I should know this. In a somewhat semi-reclined position, sort of like what it would be in a dental chair. And everything went really well, and it was a great experience. If you can get past the needle sticking, I didn't have any passing out problems and everything. I always hear stories of they're being short on blood. People need blood transfusions and need it to survive, and all these sorts of things. So please give blood. You know, if you plan it well and you do those things, it goes smoothly, and then you're doing your fellow human beings a great favor. So, and you can only do it once every 8 weeks anyway. So you got to have some time to replenish it, so that you don't go dry, like in that one movie with one of the Hot Shots movies, I think there was a joke about it in The Jerk as well. But anyway, that's it. I'm going to sign off now for sure. So this is Frank Weber from It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. See you again next week. Love you. 75 episodes already. Bye.